Welcome back to the Forgive Yourself podcast. I'm your host, Brenda Reese. Now, today we are continuing our 3-part series on self-trust. And what we're talking about is how self-trust helps us make clearer decisions, have better conversations, and come back to ourselves in the moments when we're tempted to overthink, people please, or abandon what we know is true, right? Now, this episode is called The 5 Hidden Needs That Shape Your Choices. Now, in the first episode, we talked about why you may not need more advice. You may need more self-trust. We explored how easy it can be to look outside of ourselves for more opinions or reassurance or validation, or even permission, when what we really need is to reconnect with our own inner knowing. Now, if you haven't listened to that episode yet, I encourage you to go listen because it lays the foundation for what we're talking about today. And then the third one, which will come out the week after. So today we're going underneath the overthinking, the people pleasing, the second guessing, the avoidance, and the fear of making the wrong choice. Because many times there is an unmet need underneath the pattern. And once you understand this unmet need, you can meet yourself with compassion instead of criticism. I know we all do it. And that's really the heart of today's episode. This isn't about labeling yourself as indecisive. It's not about saying, why am I like this? It's not about beating yourself up for asking for advice or avoiding conversations or saying yes when you mean no or doubting what you feel. This is about gently asking what unmet need might be underneath this pattern. What part of me is asking for care? What part of me is trying to protect me? What part of me needs to be acknowledged instead of judged? When we understand this need underneath a behavior, then we get to choose differently, not by forcing ourselves, not by shaming ourselves, but by bringing awareness, compassion, and self-trust into these places where we may have been abandoning ourselves for a really long time. Now, I mentioned unmet needs. What are those? Unmet needs are the places inside of us where something important was missing. It was inconsistent, dismissed, ignored, criticized, or conditional. Many of these needs begin early in life. A lot of times they begin in childhood. They begin in the family dynamics, in our core relationships. They begin through repeated experiences where we learned that our needs were too much, our feelings were inconvenient, our truth created conflict, or our worth was connected to what we did for other people. And I want to be clear. Having needs does not make you needy. Having needs shows you're human. We all have needs. We need safety, belonging, validation, autonomy. We need rest, and we need nourishment. And the biggies, we need to feel seen, heard, valued, respected, and free to be ourselves. Yet when those needs are unmet, especially over time, they don't just disappear. They go underground. They begin shaping our choices in subtle ways. They influence what we tolerate or not tolerate. They influence who we say yes or no to. They influence what conversations we avoid. And they influence how quickly we apologize or not. And they influence whether we speak up or stay quiet. And they influence whether we trust ourselves or look outside of ourselves for permission. Now, this matters because sometimes what looks like a communication issue can be an unmet need. Sometimes what looks like indecision is really a need for safety. What looks like people pleasing is really a need for belonging. What looks like over-explaining is really a need for validation. What looks like resentment can be a need for autonomy. And what looks like a lack of motivation is really exhaustion and a need for rest. When we only look at the behavior, we can judge ourselves, pretty harshly, right? Yet when we look underneath this behavior, we get to understand ourselves. And that understanding is what creates choice. Because if we don't have understanding, we're just reacting to this what's underneath. But now, when we're aware, we have choice. So today we are going to walk through the 5 hidden needs that often shape our decisions and our conversations. Now, as we go through these, I invite you to listen gently. You may recognize yourself in one of them or in all 5, and that's okay. A gentle reminder for you, my friend, is that this is not about finding one more frickin' thing to fix. It's not about that. This is about noticing what has been asking for your attention. So are you ready? All right. Need number 1 is safety and security. Now, this is the need to feel steady, to feel grounded, to feel that you can handle what happens next, to feel that you are not going to be abandoned or rejected, criticized, or left alone with the consequences. When safety and security have been unmet, decisions can feel risky or challenging, even when they look simple on the outside. Someone may ask you a question and your body reacts as if there's so much more at stake. A boundary may feel like too much. A conversation may feel totally overwhelming, right? A choice may feel like it must be perfect. You may find yourself thinking, gosh, what if I make the wrong decision? What if this changes everything? What if I upset them? What if I can't handle their reaction? Ooh, what if I regret this? What if I lose something or someone? And when that need for safety is activated, the nervous system often wants certainty. It wants guarantees. It wants proof that everything will be okay before you move. Of course it does. Your nervous system is trying to protect you. It's trying to keep you from pain and conflict and rejection, criticism, or the unknown. And again, this is not something to shame because it makes perfect sense. If you had times in your life when things felt unpredictable, emotionally intense, or inconsistent, or you couldn't trust, then your system probably learned, ooh, I need to know what's coming before I can relax. I need to anticipate every response. I need to avoid upsetting people. I need to stay in control so I don't get hurt. I know that one well. And as an adult, this can show up in our decision making. You may delay decisions because you're waiting to feel completely certain, right? All right, I'm raising my hand on that one. You may ask several people what they think because their reassurance helps your body calm down for a moment. I know that one too. You may stay in a situation that doesn't feel good because at least it feels familiar. That was my marriages. You may avoid a conversation because the unknown feels too big. You may choose the option that creates the least immediate discomfort, even if it costs you more later. And this is where self-trust begins, with creating inner safety, not perfect safety, not the guarantee that no one will be upset, not the promise that everything will go exactly the way you want, but enough safety inside yourself to take the next honest for you step. Now, that question from episode 1 comes back here. Can I trust myself enough to take the next honest step? Okay. When safety is the need, you might ask yourself, what do I need in order to feel safe enough to take this next step? What do I need in order to feel safe enough? Not completely safe. Keywords, safe enough. Because if we wait until there is no fear, well, geez, I'm never going to move, right? Yet if we create enough support, enough grounding, enough space, we can move honestly within that. Maybe safety looks like writing your thoughts down before a conversation. I do that. Maybe it looks like taking a walk before you respond. I also do that. Maybe it looks like saying, I need some time to think about this before I answer. I'm learning to say that. Maybe it looks like reminding yourself, I can handle someone being disappointed. That's a big one. And maybe it looks like having a plan for how you will care for yourself after a hard conversation. I've had to do that the last few years. And maybe it looks like calling a trusted friend or a coach afterwards. Now, this is important, not to ask if you said the right things or if you were allowed to speak your truth, but calling them for support, to support you as you practice honoring your truth. That is different. And here's a phrase that might be helpful to hold on to. I don't have to feel fearless in order to be honest. Because many of us wait for fear to disappear before we even trust ourselves. But sometimes self-trust is saying, I feel nervous and I can still listen to myself. I feel unsure and I can pause. I feel afraid of their reaction and I can still honor what is true for me. When safety is the hidden or unmet need, self-trust sounds like I can slow down. I can ground myself. I can take one step. I can actually support myself through discomfort. I don't have to abandon myself to feel safe. And you know what? I can ask for support. Now, this happened recently for me. I had found out that I had very significant tears in both of my hamstrings. Now, no, I'm not a football player. I'm not a skier. I'm not a runner. I'm not somebody who, this injury would happen to. It's wear and tear. I have significant tears in both of my hamstrings, which has been causing pain and issues with strength. Now, I was sent for a surgery consult, and this surgeon said, yeah, we really don't do these anymore. Yeah, you've kind of got, they're kind of significant, but, why don't you try something else first? Because, we just really don't do these anymore. And I felt dismissed. Yet I was hearing what I wanted to hear. No surgery. Yet the pain was there, along with this weakness that keeps happening. Now, my PT, my physical therapist, suggested a physiatrist. And when I went and saw them, they said, wow, these are really big. These are really big. They look almost complete tears, and I think you need a second consult. Now, the second consult, this doctor was really, really good at explaining. He was very familiar with the hamstring surgeries. He'd done a lot of them. He took the time and showed me the tears on the MRI. I was really shocked. And this is the important piece. I was shocked that part of my hamstring is off the bone and the other part of the hamstring is barely hanging on. So he said, surgery. Now I felt it dissociated. My body went into a trauma response from the back fusion surgery that I had some years ago, where I ended up with nerve damage to my right leg and was in excruciating sciatic pain for 3 years. So you can understand my reaction. My body started shaking and I went cold. Like, this is how I knew it was a trauma response. And I felt totally out of body. Now, I had done the work around the trauma from the 3 major surgeries. I had a brain tumor surgery, back fusion, neck fusion. So I was surprised at this reaction, at this, how deep this feeling was. I felt like a child. I felt all alone. There was no one to guide me. I didn't know what to do. I started crying, not in front of the doctor. This is when I got to my car. And part of me, luckily with the work I've done, part of me knew that I was okay. But this other part of me was right there in the trauma. Now, again, I felt really fortunate to have the experience I do, knowing my body and the patterns, because I knew I was out of body and I knew how to calm myself the best that I could and reorient myself back. I did breathing and I did vagus nerve work enough so I could drive home. I'm doing what I was just talking about. And, that is where we want to create safety. So I was feeling nervous, right? But I could still listen to myself. I was actually feeling fearful and I was unsure. And yet I knew enough to pause. And I was afraid. So I had to do everything to bring myself back. And then I could acknowledge I also needed support because this was big. So even a coach needs a coach. Now, I didn't need support for somebody fixing me. I had spent decades of my life wanting to be fixed until I started doing this big forgiveness work. It was more of a place of accepting that I can co-create or collaborate with a coach or therapist that I trusted to help guide me through this deeper experience, this feeling of abandonment and alone, and that I couldn't handle it because I was abandoned and alone and had to make big decisions throughout my whole childhood, like a lot of us, and where I wasn't safe in my body then, but I knew now I could, and I was able to get there. And the other biggest thing for me too right now is being emotionally stable and intelligent enough to say, I really feel nervous about this upcoming surgery. Yet I'm continuing to do this work every day to guide my brain and my body into knowing that I don't know the outcome. Yet I get to make the choice to trust myself and the medical team because I've done the research, right? And I'm feeling into my body and I'm doing the practices to prepare myself. But it's a big deal to be able to name it. And then I can do the work around it. So I wanted to share that with you so that you know you're not alone. I still go through all this. And, I do this work and I talk about it and it still happens because I'm human. So you're not alone. All right. Number 2. Need 2 is belonging and connection. Now, this one I find to be tender because, we're wired for connection. That's why that feeling of alone was so deep for me. I mean, it made me cry. I mean, it was this deep, guttural, alone feeling. So we're wired for connection. We want to belong. We want to be loved. We want to feel included, to feel chosen, to feel close to the people who matter to us. There's nothing wrong with that. The need for belonging is not the problem. The pain begins when we believe belonging requires self-abandonment. Now, when belonging and connection have been wounded or unmet, we may begin to choose connection at the expense of our truth. We may say yes when we mean no. We may stay quiet when something hurts. We may laugh something off when we feel really dismissed. Like sometimes we're shocked enough to where we can't say anything. We may become who we think others need us to be. And we may agree outwardly while disagreeing inside. Like we're going, but we're agreeing outwardly. We may avoid expressing a need because we don't want to be seen as difficult Or we may fear that if we are honest, we will lose this relationship. Again, that was all my marriages. And for many women, this is where people pleasing shows up. Not because we don't know better, not because we are weak, but because at some point, connection may have felt conditional. Maybe love felt only available when you were easy to get along with, when you were helpful, successful, agreeable, didn't ask for too much, when you didn't cause conflict, when you kept the peace, or when you made other people feel comfortable at the expense of yourself. And if that was your experience, then your system probably learned, I belong when I make things easier for other people. I belong when I don't need too much. I belong when I am useful. I belong when I'm pleasing. I belong when I don't disappoint. Remember, these are younger, right? So we learn these when we're younger. So later in life, a decision isn't just a decision. A conversation isn't just a conversation, and a boundary isn't just a boundary. It feels like a possible threat to connection. It can feel like if I say no, will they still love me? If I tell the truth, will they leave? If I stop overgiving, will I still matter? That shows up in business a lot. If I choose differently, will I be rejected? If I let them be disappointed, am I still a good person? I had to work on that one for a while. Now, this is why belonging is such a powerful hidden need, because we may think we're making a choice from kindness when we're actually making a choice from fear of disconnection. I know, right? Ouch. And I want to be gentle here because sometimes we really are choosing kindness. Sometimes we really are choosing generosity. And sometimes we really do want to show up for the people we love, which feels really good. But the question to ask is, am I choosing this freely, or am I choosing this because I'm afraid I won't belong if I don't? Now, this can be very revealing because true generosity feels very open and expansive. Fear-based pleasing feels tight. You can feel resentful, obligated, heavy. Your body usually knows the difference before your mind does. So when belonging is the need, self-trust asks, can I belong to myself and still be in connection with others? That question is powerful because healthy connection should not require you to abandon yourself. You do not have to disappear to belong. You do not have to silence your truth to be loved. And you do not have to abandon your needs to keep a relationship. And yeah, when you begin showing up more honestly, your relationships will shift. And that can be very challenging because people who benefited from your self-abandonment may not immediately celebrate your self-trust. But that does not mean you are doing something wrong. It means the pattern is changing, and this is where we practice belonging to ourselves. So here are some questions you might want to ask yourself. Where am I editing myself to stay connected? What am I not saying because I want to be liked? Where am I choosing approval over honesty? And where am I afraid that my truth will cost me belonging or staying in this relationship? This is for business and for personal. And then I'd really like you to remind yourself that I can be loving and still be honest. I can care about this person and still care about myself. I do not have to disappear to belong. That's a really important one because we do this, ladies and men. There are some men that do this too. I do not have to disappear to belong. The more you trust yourself, the more you begin to realize that real connection has room for truth. And if a relationship cannot tolerate your truth, your needs, or your boundaries, that's something worth noticing. Not from judgment, from clarity. Because self-trust asks us, is this connection asking me to leave myself? And if it is, we have the opportunity to make a choice and come back home to ourselves. Now, the third hidden need is recognition and validation. Now, this is the need to be seen, to be acknowledged, to have our feelings matter, to have your effort noticed, to have your experience recognized as real. That's a big one. Now, this need is really human. We all want to feel seen. We all want someone to say, that makes sense. I understand why you feel that way. I see how much you've been carrying. Your experience matters. And what happened mattered. You matter. It was really important to me to know I mattered because I grew up thinking I was a mistake because I was treated that way. So mattering, that's why I end every episode with you matter, because I want you to know that you do, because you do. Now, when recognition and validation have been inconsistent, or it's been withheld, or it's conditional, we may begin looking outside ourselves for proof that our feelings are valid. I did. Now, we may need someone else to agree before we can trust what we feel. I spent many years doing that. We may over-explain ourselves over and over and over again, hoping the other person will finally understand. We may feel devastated when someone dismisses our experience. We may keep trying to convince someone who is committed to misunderstanding us. Have you had that? That was all of my ex-husbands. Seriously. We may doubt our own truth because someone else doesn't validate it. And this can be painful. Because when validation is the hidden need, conversations become exhausting. Now, you may go into a conversation hoping the other person will finally say, "You're right. I get it now. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. You weren't asking too much. You weren't imagining it. You had every right to feel that way." Now, sometimes with the right person, that does happen. And when it does, it feels really good, validating, and even healing. But a lot of times it doesn't happen. Sometimes the other person cannot or will not validate your experience. Cannot is important because sometimes they're not able to. Sometimes they become defensive, or they minimize, or they change the subject. A lot of times they make it about them. They tell you that you're too sensitive. And sometimes they say, no, it didn't happen that way. They remember it differently. And when we don't have our own inner validation, their lack of validation can make us feel like we're losing our grip on our own truth. We start wondering, maybe I'm making too much of this. Maybe I shouldn't feel this way. Maybe I think I need to explain it better. Okay, if I say it one more way, they'll finally understand. And this is where self-trust becomes very important, because self-trust allows us to say, my feelings can be valid even when someone else does not validate them. That is emotional freedom, my friend. It doesn't mean you don't want to be understood. Of course you do. It doesn't mean you don't care about repairing any relationships. Of course you care deeply. It doesn't mean other people's acknowledgement doesn't matter. Sometimes acknowledgement is an important part of healing. Yet your truth cannot depend entirely on someone else's willingness or ability to see it. So before any conversation, okay, saying to yourself, because this is what self-trust would sound like before making any conversation, right? I know what I experienced. My feelings make sense. My perspective matters. I don't have to prove my pain for it to be real. I can speak from clarity rather than from the need to be approved. And here's a phrase I want to offer you. I don't need to prove my feelings in order for them to be valid. That is a deep breath moment. I don't need to prove my feelings in order for them to be valid. Because so many of us have spent years trying to prove our feelings, trying to prove we were hurt enough, prove we were patient enough, prove we had good enough reason, prove we weren't selfish, dramatic, demanding, or ungrateful. And it is exhausting. So a practice for this need can be self-validation before external validation. Before you ask someone else what they think, I would love you to ask yourself, what do I know? What do I feel? What matters to me here? What happened from my perspective? And what would I say to a dear friend who felt this way? Now, I know you've heard this before, but it makes us stop, doesn't it? It makes us pause and kind of go, would I talk to my friend this way? More than likely not. That's what makes that part really powerful for our own brain and our body. Because many of us validate others much more easily than we validate ourselves. So if a friend came to you and said, I feel hurt, I feel dismissed, and I feel like my needs don't matter, you probably wouldn't say, are you sure? Maybe you're being dramatic. You should just get over it. Right? I'm hoping you wouldn't say that. But you would more likely say, of course that hurt. Of course that matters. And of course you're allowed to feel that way. What if you offered some of that kindness to yourself? Someone said that to me today. Remember, Brenda, to be kind to yourself. As I was talking about navigating this uneasiness about the surgery. Remember to be kind to yourself. So what if you stopped waiting for someone else to give you permission to believe your own experience? When recognition and validation are the hidden need, self-trust sounds like, I see myself. I acknowledge what I feel. My experience matters even if someone else disagrees. I can want to be understood without abandoning myself to get understanding. And I don't have to keep explaining myself to people who are not listening. Okay? I did that for a long time. I don't have to keep explaining myself to people who are not listening. Sometimes self-trust means knowing when to stop trying to be validated by someone who cannot meet you there. I finally learned that with my third divorce. Yeah. Now, the fourth hidden need is autonomy and freedom. This is the need to choose, to have agency, to feel like your life belongs to you, to know that you are allowed to want what you want, to know you are allowed to say what you mean, to know that you are allowed to make decisions that align with your truth. I was going to say that. Autonomy is about being able to participate in your own life. And for many women, especially those who have been in patterns of codependency, people-pleasing, self-sacrifice, over-responsibility, autonomy can feel complicated because choosing for yourself may feel selfish. Having preferences may feel inconvenient. Setting a boundary probably feels harsh. Changing your mind may feel disloyal. Wanting something different may feel like you are disrupting the system. And you kind of are. And if you've spent a long time being who the other people needed you to be, then autonomy can feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. So here's some questions to ask yourself. Am I allowed to want this, whatever that is? Am I allowed to choose differently? Am I allowed to say no? Am I allowed to change the pattern now? Am I allowed to stop being available in the way I used to be? Those are some really, the way that those questions are worded is really helpful for the brain. And you can also change the wording if it doesn't feel right for you. But this is where guilt often comes in, right? All right, tell me if you've heard these things in your head. Who do you think you are? You should be grateful. You are being selfish. You're going to hurt them. You can't just change now. You've always done it this way. They're used to you being there. Now you're not. But guilt is not always a sign that you're doing something wrong. Guilt can be a sign that you are doing something new. Guilt appears when you are breaking an old agreement you never consciously made. An agreement to be the strong one, the available one, the agreeable one, the responsible one, the one who doesn't need much, the one who smooths everything over, the one who keeps going, the one who makes it easier for everyone else. And when you begin choosing differently, your own system, your own body may protest. And of course, other people may protest too. But that doesn't mean you are wrong. It means the pattern is being challenged. And one of the most powerful sentences for this need is I am allowed to participate in my own life my way. I want to say that again. I am allowed to participate in my own life my way. Because many of us are participating in everyone else's life. Okay, we're tracking their needs, their moods, their expectations, their preferences, their comfort, their timing, their reactions, their disappointment. This is tiring. And then our own life becomes something we visit after everyone else is taken care of, and we're exhausted. You know, autonomy says, my life includes me. My choices include me. My needs belong in this room. My truth gets a voice. My desires are not selfish just because they are mine. When autonomy is the hidden need, a practice is to make one small empowered choice, not the biggest choice, not the life-changing choice. One small choice that reminds you that I have a say. Maybe you choose not to answer immediately. Maybe you choose what you want for dinner without checking what everyone else wants first. Yeah. Oh God. That was really kind of liberating when I did that. Everybody was quite surprised. Instead of saying, I don't know, and then knowing what I didn't want. Okay, anybody out there do that? Yeah. All right. Maybe you're going to choose to say that doesn't work for me. Maybe you choose to stop explaining after you have already been clear. Maybe you choose to spend time in a way that nourishes you. Maybe you choose to ask yourself, what do I want? Before asking, what will they think? These small choices matter because autonomy is strengthened through practice. Every time you make an aligned choice, even a small one, you are teaching yourself, I can listen to me. I can choose from my truth. I can trust myself to have needs and preferences. I can be responsible without being self-abandoning. When autonomy and freedom are the hidden need, self-trust sounds like, I am allowed to choose. I am allowed to want something different. I am allowed to change my mind. That's a biggie. I am allowed to say no without writing a legal brief explaining why. I'm allowed to build a life that feels like mine. This isn't selfish. Isn't that what this work is about? Coming home to yourself, Not the self that has been shaped only around everyone else's needs, but the self that is allowed to be honest, allowed to be whole, allowed to choose, allowed to feel alive. Now, the fifth hidden need is rest and nourishment. Now, I really like this being a part of the conversation because many of us high capacity women skip right over this, right? We talk about clarity, boundaries, communication, confidence, and decision making. Yet sometimes the most self-trusting thing you can do is rest. Because exhaustion distorts everything. When we are depleted, decisions feel heavier, conversations feel more threatening, needs feel inconvenient, boundaries are harder, the inner critic gets louder, and our patience gets thinner, which makes our capacity smaller. And we beat ourselves up over that. And also, the things that might feel manageable when we're nourished can feel overwhelming when we are exhausted. So sometimes we may think we have a self-trust problem, when actually, maybe it's a depletion problem. You know, have you ever found yourself saying, why can't I figure this out? Why am I so emotional? Why does everything feel like too much? Why can't I make a frickin' decision? I did that earlier. Why am I so resentful? And maybe your body is just saying, I need care before I can get clarity. This is important. I had to take a nap and I felt so much better afterwards. You know, and we come by this because we were taught to push through, to keep going, to be productive, that we had to earn rest, that we're supposed to be useful and to take care of everyone else first and to treat our own needs as optional. Yeah, I know I'm a little bit on a soapbox right now. And if you've lived that way for a long time, rest does not feel natural. It's uncomfortable. You sit down and you feel guilty. You slow down and immediately think of everything you should be doing. You believe that care has to be earned. You may tell yourself, I'll rest when everything is done. Yet, it never gets done. And if rest is always postponed until everyone is okay, everything's finished, and no one needs anything, then rest becomes something you actually never receive. And there's something else I want to bring up. This is going to be a little touchy, but I know that it's true. It was true for myself, and it's true for so many of my clients. Sometimes we stay busy because slowing down allows us to feel what we have been avoiding: the grief, the resentment, the loneliness, the anger, the truth, the exhaustion, the realization that something isn't working, or the awareness that we have been carrying too much. So we keep moving, not because we love being exhausted, because stillness can bring us face to face with ourselves. Yet, that is also where we can heal. Because your body is part of your self-trust. Your body communicates with you. Your body keeps the score. Your body gives signals, right? These signals like tension, fatigue, tightness, heaviness, a sense of dread, a sense of relief, a softening, a deep breath, or a knowing. And when we ignore the body long enough, we may lose touch with one of the ways our inner wisdom speaks to us. So rest and nourishment are not just about taking a nap, although, like I said, I did, and that's exactly what I needed. But nourishment can feel like sitting in quiet, eating food that supports you, drinking more water, Movement. A lot of us get stuck behind the screens, right? It can mean getting some sunlight, putting our feet in the grass, laughter, an honest conversation, scheduling time alone, asking and then receiving help, and saying no. And sometimes it's not making the decision today because you are too depleted to hear yourself clearly. Nourishment is putting your hand on your heart and saying, I don't have to earn care. I deserve it. That is a self-trust practice. Because when you honor your need for rest, you are telling yourself, my body matters, my energy matters, my limits matter, my needs matter. Oh yeah, I matter. And when you begin to believe that, your decisions change, your conversations change, and your relationships change because you are no longer making choices from an empty place. When rest and nourishment are the hidden need, let's talk about this. Self-trust sounds like I can pause before I push. I can care for my body before I demand more of it. I can make decisions from a groundedness instead of depletion. I'm allowed to receive care, not just give it. Rest is not a reward. Rest is a part of returning to myself. Now, before we close, I want to give you a reflection practice for this week. I encourage you to journal with this or even talk to text, on your notes on your phone but I really encourage like writing because that engages all parts of you. Or, if you feel resistant to that, you can simply just listen and notice what stands out. So this is what I'd like you to do. Think about a decision, a conversation, a boundary, or a situation in your life right now that feels unclear, heavy, or emotionally charged. Okay. It doesn't have to be the biggest thing in your life. It can be something small, something you've been avoiding, something you keep replaying, like a conversation, something you keep asking other people about, something you know you need to say but haven't said yet. And then gently ask yourself, which need that we've talked about feels most alive in this situation? Now, it's not usually just one, right? Sometimes it can be, but usually it's a mix. So let's give you some examples. Okay. Is it safety and security? You can ask yourself, do I need grounding? Do I need space? Do I need time? Do I need to remind myself that I can handle discomfort? Okay. Or is it belonging and connection? You can ask yourself, am I afraid this choice will cost me love, approval, closeness, or acceptance? Am I editing myself to stay connected? Am I disappearing to belong? Is it recognition and validation? You can ask yourself, am I waiting for someone else to agree before I trust what I feel? Am I trying to prove my experience? Am I needing to acknowledge my own truth first? Is it autonomy and freedom? Ask yourself, am I wanting to choose differently but feel guilty? Am I afraid to take up space in my own life? Am I forgetting that I'm allowed to have a say? Or is it rest and nourishment? Ask yourself, am I too depleted to access clarity? Am I trying to make a decision from exhaustion? Am I needing care before I can hear myself? And then I'd like you to ask one more question. What is one small way that I can honor that need this week? Not to fix everything, right? Like I know we want to, not to solve the whole pattern, not become perfectly self-trusting overnight. It's just one small way. If the need is safety, maybe you give yourself time before responding. If it's belonging, maybe you tell yourself, I do not have to disappear to belong. If the need is validation, maybe you write down what you know before asking someone else what they think. If the need is autonomy, maybe you make one small choice that belongs to you. Or if the need is rest, maybe you just pause before you push. These small practices matter because every time you honor a need, instead of judging it or pushing it away, you are rebuilding self-trust. You are showing yourself, I am listening. I am paying attention. I will not keep abandoning myself. My needs matter too. Now, in the next episode, we're going to bring this all together into a practice. We are going to talk about self-trust and how it changes the way you communicate. We're also going to talk about the voice of fear and the voice of self-trust and how to differentiate, and then bringing in a self-trust practice that you can use before you make a decision, a boundary, or a conversation that feels hard. Thank you for hanging in there today with me and spending this time. It really means a lot to me. And, if this episode spoke to you, I'd love it if you'd share it with someone who may need the reminder that their needs are not too much. They are information for them to understand themselves better. And if you'd like to learn more about my work or my coaching or resources, because I've got quite a few resources on my website, you can take a look at that at BrendaReiss, REISS coaching.com. And until next time, remember that you matter. Your needs matter. But really, most importantly, you matter. Take care. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did enjoy it, would you do me a favor and share this episode and then follow us on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss one episode of the Forgive Yourself podcast, where every Friday you will get tips, tools, and stories so that you can turn your pain into peace. Take care.